So guys, I want to talk about AEW Fighter Fest, and definitely, I want to do two really, really important videos, and I'm very concerned about tonight. And why do I say that? The biggest thing that I'm concerned about is that they're going to have a bunch of matches, and I have no qualms with that. But the problem is that are they going to build up to AEW All In? Because I've said this many, many times that this has been the issue with AEW, is that they build up a lot of matches towards, the end of towards like when the pay-per-view is about to start, really. Like, I think with Dynasty they announced a couple of matches, like 2 or 3 weeks before it started. And then also with AEW Double or Nothing, like a lot of people like the show, but they said like one of the bad things about that show was that it took such a long time for them to announce matches. And then the other thing that I will say is that this is their WrestleMania, so they have to be like, okay, you know what's good about WrestleMania? They build up matches over the next coming weeks to get everybody excited. They treat it like a thriller where there's a bunch of matches being announced. Like, I know, like in the 2000s, when I started watching professional wrestling, like, Donald Trump versus Vince McMahon, hair versus hair, Ric Flair versus Shawn Michaels, and other matches like that. Learn, like as Picasso famously said, great artists steal, good artists borrow, but learn from that era of, I'm having really, really, really great like builds for things. And I've said this many times. People are happy for Mariah May, and there are people who will say it's a failure of AEW. But learn some lessons from Mariah May. The first thing, as I said, Willow Nightingale, Marina Shafir should be having a street fight. I think they're going to do the women's tag team championship. So, set up a tag team tournament, and then maybe you do an over the rope type of match, really. So you have like 10 different women or 20 different women, and you throw people over the ropes, really. And then you get to know who these people are, and they want to be the first tag team champions. They want to win a title at AEW All In, and then you kind of set up your women's division. I've also said, what about Athena? What if she said, I want to defend my women's title at AEW All In? What would happen if you had Bandito come out and say, I want to defend my ROH men's title, just to show that, hey, if the champion, these two champions of ROH, want to defend their titles at the biggest show of the year, because that actually is a good look for those titles. So whoever gets those titles in the future, they kind of keep that pattern, really. Like I've said with WWE, if I was running the company, the NXT title would be defended at WrestleMania, just to kind of give a motivation to people to be like, hey, I'm the NXT champion. You have Trick Williams. Imagine that pop he would have gotten if he had, whooped that Trick at WrestleMania. That would have been something. The other thing that I would say is, and I've talked about this. You can do the Von Erichs challenging LFI. You could set up some matches for AEW Grand Slam in Mexico. Like, I'm mad with AEW because they just sold out Grand Slam in Mexico. Why are you not announcing a match card? You should say we're going to have Will Ospreay versus Mystico. We're actually going to have Hangman Adam Page versus like Hachishiro. We're going to have CMLL versus AEW. There's actually, people don't know about this, but there's actually a Ring of Honor show. So, why are they not promoting Mexico Arena? Because you need to show that it's a big deal, really. Learn from AEW Australia that, make it a big, big deal. Make it feel worth it. And then again, you have to follow this up by saying, hey, what? Maybe you can do Forbidden Door in Mexico, or hey, what? We can try AEW Grand Slam again in Mexico during the winter season, just like you did with Australia, to see if it's actually a better audience. So yeah, you shouldn't just be having match after match after match. And then the other thing too is that take advantage that it's a 4-hour show, because having like you don't want to do a double Dynamite, and that's what I think they're gonna do. They're gonna do a double Dynamite. They're gonna have extra matches. It's gonna feel like a AEW pay-per-view show, and that's not what they need to do. They need to just say, hey, we need to use this ample time. We need to use this 4 hours to say, okay, AEW All In is coming up. We need to treat that like a WrestleMania, because what WWE's doing, they're offering premium live events. So what do fans want to see? Do they want to see premium live events, or do they want to see a WrestleMania caliber show? And then on top of that, we need to establish the heavyweight champion picture. We need to establish, the women's division. We need to establish the developmental division by ROH. We need to also advertise a card for Grand Slam to make sure the people who are buying tickets to Mexico, yours truly, are actually, it's all worth it, really. So has to be a lot of just build towards other shows, really. And if they don't do that, what's going to happen tonight is it's going to be we're going to say, oh, this is really drawn out, and we're never going to watch 4-hour shows anymore, because it feels just like Monday Night Raw when they made it like 3 hours, or SmackDown when they made it 3 hours. So I hope AEW understands that they're really in the grind season for AEW All In, and what. And as I said, I think I looked it up. They have 18,000 people there. It can be 50,000, and they had to put in the work to make that happen. Really, start announcing matches, get people really excited, and treat it like a big deal. Like learn from AEW Grand Slam Australia. Don't do something where you're like, okay, well, it's not where we're at in our quota, so we're not going to try to just elevate it up the ante. Really, so. There's a lot of things that they can do, and I want to talk about some matches. I've said this, Dustin Rhodes and Von Erichs versus LFI. You have Jake the Snakes Roberts. You also have Kevin Von Erich, and you have Dustin Rhodes out there. You have something like Will Nightingale versus Marina Shafir. You have Bandito versus either Big Cass, or Bandito versus Hologram, or Bandito versus Chris Jericho one more time. You also can have a women's over the rope match. I've said this before. You can do the Hurt Syndicate versus the Don Callis family. It could be MJF and Bobby Lashley versus two members of the Don Callis family, or it could be a Fabulous Freebird thing where it's 3 people from Don Callis and MJF, and he's also a tag team champion. They get the tag team titles. You can do the Ops versus the Death Riders. You can do Swerve versus Will Ospreay, and you can also do something like, Adam Page versus John Moxley. You can even set it up as a last blood match or something like that, or last man standing match. You can do Gabe Kidd and Willow Nightingale. You can do Gabe Kidd and Marina Shafir versus Willow Nightingale and Mark Briscoe if you want to do an intergender match. You can do Nick Wayne versus Christian Cage. You can do FTR with Daniel Garcia versus Nigel McGuinness, Adam Copeland, and somebody else. You can do something like, have your casino battle royal match. The winner gets an AEW contract anytime, anywhere. You throw Darby Allin into that, but the next couple of weeks you kind of build people who want that opportunity. I've said do Adam Cole versus Kyle Fletcher. You can set up something where you can set up Okada and Omega. You can set up Anthony Bowens versus Max Caster. Like I said, Nick Wayne versus Christian Cage. There's so many things that they can do very well. And tonight has to be the start of that, to say, hey, we're in our all-in season. This needs to feel like the WrestleMania of the summer. This needs to feel like, Slammiversary on steroids. They really have to up the ante for this show. So are you going to use your 4 hours tonight to do that? Or are you just going to have a bunch of matches and have Dave Meltzer do his Will Ospreay? His Will Ospreay type of thing, So because you can be doing that tonight, really, So like I said, definitely, build it. And then also, too, I want my boy Powerhouse Hobbs to have a match at All In. He's one of the baddest motherfuckers that ever lived. Along with Samoa Joe. Both of them are the baddest motherfuckers that ever lived. And also Willow Nightingale, she's a strong, beautiful, sexy woman, takes shit from nobody. You know what? She deserves a match, at AEW All In. She's one of the baddest she's one of the baddest bitches that ever lived since Awesome Kong. I like that. Strong, beautiful woman with power, takes shit from nobody, and that can whoop my ass. It can whoop anybody's ass. So hopefully they look at the people that they have and they think about matches for people who deserve it. They think about directions for the women's division going forward because that needs to be fixed. They use AEW. I think it's called Death Before Dishonor or something like that. And that show that they're having, I think it's either Supercard of Honor or Death Before Dishonor, whatever show that they're having for ROH on Friday, that they decide to that they honestly really decide to say, hey, we need to revamp ROH. We need to make this a developmental. Who are you gonna be using, for that show? And if it's a bunch of pure matches for the pure championship, fuck them for that because that's not gonna be a draw really. So AEW needs to use their ample time tonight to build up to All In, and then use All In as a way of saying, hey, we're gonna have some things figured out. We're gonna have our heavyweight championship picture figured out. We're going to have our women's division figured out. We're going to use the ROH show to figure out our developmental system. We're going to give matches to people who deserve it. To reiterate, Will Nightingale, the Death Riders, the Don Callis family, Anthony Bowens, Max Caster, Will Ospreay, Swerve Strickland, Powerhouse Hobbs, the Ops, Nick Wayne, Christian Cage, Adam Copeland. There are so many people. There's so many, and you also have to kind of figure out what stories, which matches you want to have, because there are some matches that they should be having on that show, instead of just holding it off, really, So I just hope, I keep my fingers crossed that Tony Khan will do the right thing about this, and also too the Von Erichs and Dustin, versus the LFI, because LFI Roosh, you gotta look at your future stars. You can have Wardlow come back, and other things like that. There's so much that they can do to really just, to just do this right and set up a great direction. Because, as I said, the P word is not Poontang Pie. It's pivot for AEW. Like I said, there's been some negativity around WWE. Take advantage of it by knocking people's socks off with this show. So that's all I got to say, really. Hopefully they get their shit together with AEW.